The glory of God is intelligence, or in other words, light and truth. It says, all truth is independent in that sphere in which God has placed it, to act for itself, as all intelligence also. Otherwise, there is no existence. We're living in a time of unprecedented change. And so any AI system that diminishes human agency isn't enhancing intelligence. It's undermining it. It means that we need AI systems that prioritize accuracy, transparency, and educational value. So when AI makes a recommendation, the users should be able to understand the reasoning behind it.
Rachel Hutchins, JD, is a strategy and AI professor in the Woodbury School of Business at Utah Valley University and the outgoing executive director of UVU's Applied Artificial Intelligence Institute. She's also the AI transformation strategist at Clarion AI Partners, where she focuses on ethical and strategic AI adoption that enhances human intelligence and agency. Rachel holds a Juris Doctor and a BA in French, and then for her abstract, an exploration of how artificial intelligence can magnify human intelligence and agency, aligning with the concept that the glory of God is intelligence. It delves into strategic ethical AI adoption that genuinely enhances our divine potential rather than diminishes it, creating a future where AI acts as a powerful partner in accelerating human growth and progress. Let's give it up for Rachel.
So I don't know if the bio communicated it, but I kind of spend almost all day, every day in some approach to AI, whether or not it's just a conversation on theory, whether or not it's convincing a professor that they actually do have to know at least something about it, because otherwise they actually may not have a job, or it's working with a company looking at what they've got going, where AI actually might make sense or not, unlike what a lot of companies think. It's not just throwing spaghetti at a wall and seeing what sticks. There's some strategy there. And then when doing that, how are we going to do that responsibly and ethically? How are we going to control what that AI is doing? How do we give it a personality that is consistent with the beliefs, the corporate structure, the corporate personality that it's going to be employed to serve? So there are a few things that I think about consistently. And what I want to share tonight is kind of a convergence of some of those things. So it's fun to have a group of people that have to sit here and listen to me hear the inner workings of my head, which is a scary place sometimes, which some of you in this room know more so than others.
If you deal with us, we can deal with you.
I don't know. You, yes. So a phrase that has had me thinking for a while, especially the past couple of years since the grand appearance of ChatGPT in the public space, is the statement from Section 93 of the Doctrine and Covenants. The glory of God is intelligence, or in other words, light and truth. The glory of God is intelligence, in other words, light and truth. So I find this statement profound. Not many words, seems simple enough, but the more I've thought about this, especially in light of AI, the more nuanced it has become to me. And I've continued to think a lot about it. So it has led me to a central question. And that question is, if intelligence is literally a divine attribute, something we share eternally with God, how should we then approach technologies that have the potential to amplify human intelligence, or, if you're depending on the messaging you're listening to, technologies that could supplant human intelligence? So I always like to ask people what, when they hear the words artificial intelligence, what their gut reaction is. And I tend to kind of look around the room, and I can oftentimes see it on their faces, or I get a thumbs up with their maniacal grin like that. Any words, thoughts, quick emotions that come to mind when you hear those two words, artificial intelligence? Cautious optimism. Cautious optimism.
I didn't used to, but now I honestly get a little bit of anxiety.
Yeah. There are many reasons, I'm guessing, why that anxiety could rear its ugly head.
Yeah, the intelligence part is great. The artificial part is what gives people pause.
Yeah.
Artificial isn't.
Right. And what kind of artificial are we talking about? Is it, the kind of sweetener that ends up being recalled because it sends you running for the bathroom? Or, what are we talking about?
Is it actually bad?
Exactly. Yeah. And where's that line?
I get both excited and exasperated at the same time, especially when I'm trying to get into writing.
Yeah. Please, please, please.
Oh, we need to have that discussion later.
So if you go between this is amazing and this sucks.
Yeah.
It's too easy.
Isn't that just the case with any technology though?
Or any intelligence.
Yeah. No. Or lack thereof. I think that's a good place to fall, though, in between this is amazing and this sucks. I think if we're finding that tension there, that's probably a good sign, but we'll get back to that. So I think that the varied reactions in this room, and honestly, normally when I ask that question, the reactions are on a spectrum that is more extreme. But they're to be expected. We're living in a time of unprecedented change, and the speed of that change is even more unprecedented. And I think it's also a really interesting and fun convergence of three different major developments. The first of that is, we're seeing AI in different aspects achieving human level performance. Not in everything, but in many, and at a pace that wasn't predicted. A lot of these things were predicted, but they were a lot further out down the road. So we've moved from AI that can play chess to AI that can diagnose diseases. It can write code sometimes. It can even help us to understand ancient languages. We have a set of scrolls coming from Italy in next spring to UVU, and they're using AI to help decipher script from pages that have been stuck together that they couldn't do with normal imaging. But not only is it able to peel away the layers of text, but then to help translate that text. Mind-blowing. The second thing is we had the church come out and give an official endorsement of ethical AI development. This was last March. And then third, the research community is increasingly recognizing that AI works best, not as a replacement for human intelligence, but as an amplification of it. We're seeing more and more focus and money put into that, which I find incredibly encouraging. So I want to look at what it means to have these three things kind of coming in together. So I wanted to start with the the theological foundation. I believe that section 93 of the DNC that I started with provides one of the most sophisticated frameworks for understanding intelligence that exists in, I would say, any religious tradition. So it establishes three principles that directly inform how we think about AI development. The first of these is that intelligence is co-eternal with God. So in verse 29, it says, "Man was also in the beginning with God. Intelligence, or the light of truth, was not created or made, neither indeed can be." So it's not just saying we're smart. It's saying that the intelligence within us shares an eternal nature with divinity itself. We all have it. It's there. The second principle is that agency is intrinsic to intelligence. So in the following verse 30, it says, "All truth is independent in that sphere in which God has placed it, to act for itself, as all intelligence also. Otherwise, there is no existence." this is so profound to me that agency isn't just a God-given gift to us. It's a fundamental characteristic of intelligence itself. Yes.
Well, it's also interesting that in the first verse you shared, it says that it can be created, right? I don't know exactly how to interpret that, but one thing that comes to my mind is the idea that like it has to develop, it has to be trained in the case of artificial intelligence, or in the case of human intelligence, like has to be learned, developed, right?
Yeah.
Not something you could just like zap into existence.
Right. Which is beautiful for thinking about how we think about and approach AI development. Right? We are going to look at it in a way that's beneficial, taking that divine, spiritually appointed methodology becomes really powerful. So that the third principle is that intelligence equals light and truth. So it's not just computational power, but the ability to access and comprehend and act upon truth, to build, to work towards. So this is where it gets a little bit relevant for me. I, until a few weeks ago, was the executive director of UVU's new Applied AI Institute. And as such, part of what I was doing was working with faculty, deans, students across campus on kind of figuring out how to actually apply AI in a way that was beneficial for campus itself, for life, and for the future workforce. Something was discovered that I found really interesting. One of our groups on campus developed what they call an AI academy that teachers could sign up for voluntarily to basically give them a grounding, basic AI literacy, and a way to develop some competency through small projects to practice. And then they would come together once a week live for several hours to meet and kind of push that understanding. After the first cohort finished, I don't know, like 6 months ago, I met with the people doing the course and I asked them if there are any commonalities. What were the struggles? What was surprising? And they said, the common struggle, and it was kind of surprising to us, was that prompt engineering was a massive problem. And I said, what do you mean? Didn't sound that surprising to me. And they said, well, we had professors coming to us saying, well, you told us to use this prompt and I did, but it didn't work. And they would say, well, what do you mean? And basically what they described would be, well, this is my answer, and it's kind of awful. So glad they fixed that, right? But they realized that in their instructions, the idea of the iterative process had been lost. And the professors were just accepting it as it was. And even through hand-holding in the process, they were not pushing back at all. They were not asking questions. They really were treating it like a magic box that they would push buttons and it would spit out the answer, like fortune teller at the fair or something. But that's not how intelligence works, is it? So the ones who succeeded quicker and at a greater volume were the ones who naturally started to adapt to that process and to push back and to ask questions and to become part of that process, not just treat it as this magic box. They included their own expertise, their own thoughts, their own experiences into that process. So in other words, they had to exercise agency. So a lot different from being a passive recipient and then the technology failed them. So that artificial intelligence didn't look so intelligent. So this, I think, really perfectly illuminates what verse 30 says, that intelligence must act for itself. There's that agency built into that. So any AI system that diminishes human agency isn't enhancing intelligence. It's undermining it. It's something that we should be very wary of. This revelation gives us a progressive model for intelligence development. Let's see. So it says, he that keepeth his commandments receiveth truth and light until he is glorified in truth and knoweth all things. So I like that this is describing a process. a process of receiving truth and light progressively through obedience to divine principles. It's not just I hit the button, I'm now poof, magically smart. That'd be awesome. I have days where I really wish for that. But it is this process. So the thing I love is it speaks to other tools we already have and are familiar with, and that I think we can apply if it matches some of the principles we've used before, but tools that help us learn more quickly and understand complex patterns, access vast repositories of knowledge. Those types of tools are things we tend to use in this process. So if AI is serving a similar function, this could be put into that same arsenal, as you will, of educational tools that help facilitate spiritual and intellectual growth. So if we look at AI and say, okay, yes, it's helping us to learn more quickly. We can understand complex patterns. It's giving us access to a vast amount of knowledge. This could be a good thing. But the crucial part in all of this, the passage that I quoted emphasizes that commandment keeping is prerequisite for receiving truth. So even the most sophisticated AI solution cannot substitute for our moral discipline and our spiritual sensitivity when it comes to receiving spiritual truth. The nice thing about that is that this creates a natural boundary for AI's role in our spiritual development. So it can act as an instrument for accessing and processing information, but spiritual discernment and moral development remain something that is strictly human in nature and strictly human responsibility. All right, I mentioned that the church came out with a position last year, and they came out with 4 principles to guide in how we approach AI in our spirituality. The first one is a spiritual connection. So they said the AI should support, not supplant, the connection between God and his children. Second one, transparency, that people should understand when they're interfacing with AI rather than humans. Third, that of privacy and security, sacred and personal information must be safeguarded. And then 4, accountability. They said that regular testing must exist to ensure accuracy, truthfulness, and compliance. So I want you to notice that these principles preserve exactly what Section 93 discusses. Yeah.
I was just gonna add that, this came out like relatively early in the hype cycle of AI, and I'm actually quite impressed that the church took such a proactive stance. Development principles for AI. This is like a minor little side story, but a friend of mine many, many years ago, when the church's website wasn't new, he a Catholic friend. So, man, I wish my church had a website. You know, that was like, you know, well developed and stuff. I guess it took a little longer, but I do appreciate that they're sort of a little more willing to embrace new technologies. You know, provide what seemed to me like a really reasonable sense of what guidelines on this.
I agree, and actually quite forward thinking based on some of what we knew, even such a short time ago. Interesting to add on to that, the AI law firm that I'm also working for right now, the CEO of our firm has been doing work for the church on some of their systems, developing the elements that help support these principles. And so it's been really interesting to see just how difficult it can be to meet these 4 things. But they are really making an effort to live that. But it's not easy.
Do you have insight into how they reach these 4 principles? What kind of?
You know, I haven't asked. I'll have to ask my
Share
friend.
one little anecdote that might be interesting.
Yeah.
So I don't know how well you know Steve and his wife, but his wife Esther is a religious artist. She does a lot of work related to church things and is sometimes brought in to get her opinion on various things. And she came to realize or understand that some art that was being used in various church publications was actually AI generated art, but they did not know who it was. And she accidentally kind of created a controversy by mentioning it somewhere. Like the church came back to her and said, like, how do you know this is AI? And you and your contract with this person that they did not use AI in their work. And so it was kind of interesting. But that to me at least shows that the church is actually very, very concerned about making sure that it knows the source of all the different, any creative works that are being used by the church in various settings.
With that in mind, I should mention I use AI to help create slides. Just
Well, just being transparent.
I hate making slides, so AI helped me do what I hate doing. So I could spend more time on the human pieces, right?
My question, what makes it difficult, maybe, you're saying in the application of these, maybe you have an example of what makes it hard to kind of.
Transparency is a fine line to walk. You have to do it in a way where you don't sow in distrust, but and a way that doesn't kind of take over what you're seeing. Like if you're talking an online system, how much notification is enough notification where it's ethically ample, but not overwhelming. So the transparency piece alone, which we would think can get really, really complicated. As you scroll down a page, all those pieces can be interspersed. So how do you walk that line?
Yeah, I've just noticed that Luke and Francel are having a hard time hearing because of the fan.
Oh, are they? If you guys are.
Yeah, thanks. Beautiful house. Thanks.
Accountability is a mind-blowingly monumental task. The accuracy piece is, I don't know if anyone has ever had to be a college professor and teach anything about research and teaching students about quality of sources and verifying, fact checking it. For one little paper, it's hard enough to get students to understand how to do it correctly, to do it and then have to actually go in and verify information. To do that for source after source, whether it's a magazine publication, whether it's something that's being said over a pulpit, whether it's just an article, anything like that I don't know how you do it accurately, consistently at the volume that they deal with.
Yeah, I would say too that many people who are taking full advantage of AI are using it so often to even just coach them or suggest things in terms of what they've written. And so this idea of, do I need to reveal when I'm merely using AI as a reviewer or proofreader of my work? And I personally would not feel that was necessary, but I understand how some folks might be concerned about that. And then I don't know if you read this article in the New Yorker recently where this woman interviewed a bunch of college students about their use of AI. And they're basically all just confessing openly that they were using it for every assignment. Largely allowing it to just generate almost all their work for them, which obviously we don't want. At
Right.
least I don't think it's a good application, but it's a fact that we're dealing with right now.
It is.
Adapt curriculum to still get students to learn things, even if they are using AI.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, I've experienced where ChatGPT just totally makes crap up.
Isn't it scary and hilarious?
Yeah, and also apparently ChatGPT is having more hallucinations. Is that what they're calling it?
Yeah.
Because it's training on itself.
It always apologizes when you catch it. No, and then, oh, I'm sorry.
Absolutely.
Like, very polite.
So-
Phrase. You're absolutely right. Oh, man, that is so annoying.
Have you ever, sometimes it digs in though, it is very, very sure, but to me,
Like to be cornered.
Right.
It doesn't like to be cornered. I apologize.
people get really, really frustrated or upset by that, and they expect it to be a Google, right? No, you have to look at it as it's being trained on humanity. How often have I been wrong? And I'm sure that I'm right. And someone asked me, and I'm going to dig in. Why am I expecting the AI to be any different if it's just trained on everything that we've done? So sometimes we forget and we kind of merge it into the idea of, oh, I'm gonna, search something in the Google search bar and these results are gonna come back, as factual things because it's coming straight from the source. And we're expecting it to be like that, but yet we're expecting it to be something else. And sometimes,
The first result on Google search is now Gemini, so.
right, yeah. Well, I mean, the invention of SEO started the downhill slide on Google searches in the first years. So this is a difficult struggle. But I think actually one that is a powerful struggle in our effort to grow, to become, to augment who we are as humans when it comes to our spiritual progression. Let's see.
There is also this interesting quality that was mentioned earlier about, like, you talked about SEO and some of the challenges. What's funny though is, like, prior to Google's page ranking algorithm, there was people would actually publish like paper books on cool sites to visit on the internet, or Yahoo was the thing, and it was like a human curated list, but like it was still not as good as even the poorly ranked Google system. And Google, of course, got worse when people started realizing that they could game the algorithm. Right? I think that the challenge we're talking about, and I think it's related to AI as well. We're talking about training AI, but the challenge is that there's always this feedback loop going on where it's possible to game the results and to code to the benchmarks that are being created to analyze AI. And so it's kind of this, I think it's an ongoing struggle that will probably be with us for a long time.
I would venture to say you're correct. And part of that feedback loop is an issue when it's feeding back on itself. Because when it starts to train on what it had instead of training on new material, it's like making photocopies, right? Each copy is a little bit worse until it just is unintelligible. So that can get a little scary. Talk about the ultimate hallucination. It's just total garbage.
I think going back to this though, it really depends on what your goal is. If we're talking about the multiple uses of AI, if it's to get a task done, we have a responsibility to ask ourselves, do we want to become more intelligent in the completion of this task? Or is this just a to-do, right? Because AI can be used for both. It can be used to simply do the task for us, or it can be used in a way that genuinely increases our intelligence and draws us closer to becoming who we're meant to be, or drawing us closer to divinity. And I think these principles are kind of meant to safeguard that path of us becoming like our Heavenly Father or like God, or achieving our ultimate potential, however you want to look at that. In my class, I teach data analytics, I teach Excel. It's a process, it's a to-do, right? And I let my students know that there's multiple ways that you can be taught how to use these formulas or how to do these things. You can come to my lecture, you can look it up on the internet, on YouTube, there's fantastic videos. You can ask AI how to do this. And that's fine, that's great. But I also let them know that the goal is intelligence. And so your test, your final is a proctored exam where you will have no phone, you will have no internet, you will have no phone a friend. It's just you and can you do this? And so for me, I have to tell them, you can play out in the real world and you can figure it out however you want to figure it out. But the test, the real test is, can you produce this by yourself, right? And, and that's a gigantic source of stress for them. But because the work becomes easy, it's like, yeah, you can ask ChatGPT to do this for you, no problem, but you're going to fail at the end. And so I think I look at that for me, and it's like every time I ask ChatGPT to do something for me, I think maybe I should be taking this slower. Is this something I really want to learn? Is this something I really want to embody and include it in myself? Or is this just like, do I, not to pick on you, but do I just need this to make a bunch of slides real quick? Because I hate doing this or whatever, I would have ChatGPT do my dishes like 100% of the time if it could. But I think that's the ethical question we need to ask ourselves as we use this technology.
Give it a couple of years.
Hopefully,
Fingers crossed.
I'll be a happy guy.
As long as you remember how to do the dishes yourself.
I'm gonna have to spot check.
Well, yeah, you gotta go in every now and then,
The little competency exam.
It's like, oh, there's a little salmonella on the edge of this one.
I love that point though, but I think it plays perfectly into the structure, right? Because just because it may be doing a task for you doesn't mean it's not adding to your spiritual growth. If you are using it to do that so that you are then given more time to do the inherently human spiritual growth promoting aspects of whatever it is you're working on, whether it's related or not, then there is huge power. And I love that example. But if you're using it to do something for you where you actually have to know how to do it later, that's problematic. But the church is employing that technique. Yeah.
Yeah, I would also just add, I think there's a lot of complexity hidden under this question of like how to develop a curriculum in the age of AI, because that you could point to historical precedents for like arguments about whether students should be allowed to use calculators on exams, right? And a lot of fretting over that, and yet it's like most people now feel like the part of doing long division by hand is like not the most the best use of our students' time. It is one of those things that are still required to memorize in grade school, but like it might be the case that if we would be better off teaching students how to use Excel in a way that uses AI as an assistant or something. I'm not trying to tell you how to do your job, because I'm not sure you know better than I do, but more just like everything's up for grabs right now. Like we don't know exactly what the best way of learning is with this new tool,
And I think that's where we have a leg up, actually. If we take AI away from the addition of the spiritual component, if we put it purely secular, that's where we start to run into issues. But if we make sure that we are looking at emphasizing human spiritual agency, accessing truth, and our divine relationships, that's where it gets a little bit easier for us to decide how are we going to actually employ this. I think we're seeing some small examples of that in what the church is doing. So let's see, I have a couple of examples I wrote down. Family history work now is using AI to accelerate the genealogical research, which awesome, right? I don't know, I'm not one who loves that process. So if AI is going to do it for me, all right.
I'm with you.
But we have to keep humans in that loop for evaluating relationships, for verifying, information, and for then doing the work that has to be done once that information has been input into the system. We even now have an AI powered search for the general handbook. So hopefully there aren't too many hallucinations, so that could be very entertaining. But even then, we have the handbook, we get those answers, but that doesn't release leaders from their responsibilities in actually working with those that they serve.
It's interesting to note that the handbook also has, if I recall correctly, it has like this thing like where you can give it feedback about whether that answer was a good answer or not, you know? Which I think is good, that they have like human in the loop
Yeah,
system.
go ahead.
Yeah,
Yeah.
gotta get there.
I would die to know, even like in testing, what some of the questions, answers were. There
Oh,
have to been some good ones, that.
As far as genealogy goes, as long as they're baptizing actual people and not artificial created ones.
No
that-
hallucinated people.
No,
you
there's
know,
no
so kings that I'm related to that never existed,
Well,
you know,
that
maybe
becomes
that's.
the most interesting question though, if it actually becomes true AGI, if it really is an independently functioning intelligence and it meets the criteria that were given up there. And do we treat it as a person in the same light as we would any other?
So there have been a few people that have baptized people that don't exist.
Yeah, I was gonna say that.
Yeah, that's not new. So that's actually a human problem anyways, right?
Yeah, like, there was an era prior to like discovering better deduplication system for temple work, where like about 90% of all temple work being submitted was duplicate work, right?
Oh, wow.
We were just talking about this, yeah.
And so we've been there before.
They must be super holy, get that thing.
History repeats itself. So I think I'm preaching to the choir, but advocating for a collaboration between human and AI, I think is incredibly important. And it's an idea that's been around for a bit. I don't know if anybody remembers a man named Garry Kasparov. He is the man he's the grand chess master who lost to IBM's Deep Blue computer back in 97. But the thing that's interesting about that story is what happened after. Because Kasparov began experimenting with teams that combined human players and AI systems. And the results was surprising to him. So he found that if a human was in the loop, it didn't even matter if it was a weak human. That was still stronger than a computer playing alone. Now, if you took a strong human and a machine, of course it was better, but even a weak human and a machine, that combination was better. All of his iterations that he came up with, if a human was included and a machine, if that collaboration existed, the results were better than a machine alone. So think about what this means. So the key isn't about building powerful AI systems. It's not about finding the smartest humans. The key is developing better processes for human AI collaboration. So you've got human elements that you need to consider, like creativity, wisdom, ethical reasoning, contextual understanding. You've got those elements that the humans bring to the table. And then you've got the AI capabilities, so computational power, pattern recognition, the speed of data processing. And with those elements combined, you can create a hybrid intelligence that is superior to either one alone.
It seems like, maybe I'm wrong, and obviously the AI is improving rapidly. Well, I guess it's more the human element. There was a study that they did with doctors diagnosing patients, and the AI by itself performed better than both doctors by themselves and doctors using AI, because the doctors would frequently second guess and override what the AI they had been discussing with the AI. So I don't, human involvement might not always be a benefit.
There's another component, though, that you need to take into consideration. And I love that you bring that up because I actually have a related example, but I've been in discussions where part of the decision of whether or not to use AI and to what extent, part of that is where do you want to give up any human involvement? Even if it's showing that it's better.
Oh, yeah, sure. But for instance, you would still maybe want humans to review it, but
Unless that makes it worse.
Yeah.
but you want the doctor to be the one, like a human to be the one administering the
Unless that makes it
information.
worse.
Sometimes those surgeons are much more precise when they're robotic.
There is the question also of like liability, right? I know, for example, the military has this really strong principle that AI can help. They welcome the help of AI, but you're fighting with.
Using the simplest intelligence systems here. The more with the program knows past my bedtime and he thinks that it knows.
It's a fishbowl in here. I don't know if everybody needs to be able
So
to.
the military has this principle of like not ever having an automated decision pull the trigger when it comes to human lives, right? And so they want to augment human intelligence, but then ultimately in war fighting, they want to make sure that a person is making that choice, which seems correct. And none of us want murder bots like being turned on us, right? So, but I think that's interesting, this idea of like having important decisions be humans be responsible for those importance.
And in some of these systems where they are, the AI systems are consistently outperforming humans, part of that is humans learning to work with these systems and knowing how to be that human in ways that are actually beneficial and not just then building problems in that wouldn't have been there before. An example that I saw actually speaks to that a little bit. I just thought it was a really beautiful example of this kind of tension between that collaboration. How much is human? How much is AI? I was at the conference called the Arab Healthcare Conference in Dubai at the beginning of last year, and PricewaterhouseCoopers demoed a dashboard platform with a massive AI behind it that had been trained on all of the information from patients in the UAE. And their privacy laws are slightly different than ours in that any health institution or medical institution with the proper licensing, they can share their information into a big pool. There aren't walls, which makes a lot of sense. It makes it so a patient doesn't have to ever have records transferred. All of that statistical data, all that goes into a big pool. And depending on who's doing the statistics, anywhere between 10 and 15% of the population of the Emirates is actually Emirati. So you're talking about 85 to 90% of the population that are foreigners. So you've got the most incredible diversity of human beings in this tiny little country, which leads to a lot of very interesting information when it's accessible in that way. So you feed this into your AI and you build a really powerful, clean, usable dashboard system. And it was giving the practitioners, the physicians, whoever was using it, really unprecedented insights into different aspects of health when it came to the people that they were serving. And the brilliant way on how this was designed, it wasn't that AI was making the diagnosis. Instead, it was providing moments for the physician or nurse or whoever it was to pause and consider certain pieces of key information. So basically, in many ways, yes, the AI was doing the diagnosing, but it was doing it in a way that it was working with human ego to teach them how to collaborate on the information it actually knew way better because it could process such vast information in short amount of time to make it useful. but it helped the healthcare provider walk through that process. And that speaks to what you said, Molly, just really beautifully. The professor and I that went to the conference, we kind of sat there and with our jaws on the ground, like, who came up with the way of doing this? It was brilliant. Yeah.
I have a hypothesis that I'd like your feedback on, and maybe Jordan's too.
Yeah.
Jordan's an MD. I suspect that in the case that Molly has brought up, my hypothesis would be that worse results would be achieved when the doctors were put into a position where they felt like it was adversarial.
Yes.
Like they had to prove that they knew what they were doing despite the AI. Whereas the results could be superior in a case where they're put into a position psychologically where they're feeling cooperative with this tool, like it's helping them achieve a goal in common. And I'm wondering if that matches what you've observed, or Jordan, what you might sense intuitively or in experience.
The interesting thing about this, and then I'll really answer your question. Not only they were showing that that collaboration was really important because yes, the AI was super accurate, but it would also prompt the physician to ask questions. Well, what about this? Like the AI isn't there to sit and ask the question, some of the questions of patients. It could maybe in the future observe all these things, but there's nuance in things that were happening where that physician or that healthcare provider was going back to that system, and there's that push and pull. And the physician was open to it because it wasn't adversarial. There have been a lot of, not necessarily the same case, but other situations where an AI has gotten combative and things always end badly. Though human and human interactions where things are combative, we tend to get kind of stupid really fast. So yes, I don't know what your perspective is on that.
Well, I do have a tool that I use, but I will sometimes like ask for it to help me build something called a differential diagnosis. And, it really is, I've got to make sure I'm concise with what I put in there, but also broad enough to where it doesn't narrow down the differential too quickly. I want it to remain open, but basically have a quick kind of checklist of things I can mark off during the moment that that patient is there in front of me, and not something that's going to take weeks. So when I do get surprised by it, that's always kind of an interesting moment, like, oh, I haven't considered that, or I don't think that's quite right, but I wonder why it suggested that, and it makes me think differently about the patient case than I maybe was predisposed to think. But yeah, I've never been like insulted by it. I don't think that would go well.
Yeah.
But it does gently say, like, have you considered this, and things like that. And even when it's way off, I think, oh, it's still interesting, to think that. You like I said, you don't want to narrow things too quickly.
Right.
I just wanted to make one comment on that accountability piece. I think we are going to see more and more automation of tasks, like medical tasks. And that may even include surgeries, surgeries being performed completely autonomously. But I hope that for important, like life-changing diagnoses and treatments, that we will always still have, a human behind those decisions, because you can't sue a robot, right?
You could try.
You could try, but yeah, who's responsible?
Yeah, that's
I think-
the big reasons for this.
Comes the self-driving car dilemma.
Yeah, I think the idea of like culpability is really important because when we are like in this like human AI is greater than either alone, I feel like it's sort of like a liminal space where it's like we are there because there are some overlaps between intelligence such that the both of them are, better. But it seems like once we get to a point of artificial general intelligence, or shortly thereafter artificial superintelligence, that pretty much along all categories AI will be like more capable. But like at that point, do we say they have moral status now, or like what comes of the culpability question? So,
And I think we're going to be chasing that line maybe forever, because things are going to continue to change and evolve. Where is that line? Where do we stop that automation, or where do we make sure humans are involved. In fact,
Can I ask a question as well?
yeah,
So, when we talk about human plus AI is greater than either alone, right now, this is a very slow sort of external process. What kinds of ethical considerations do we have for like augmenting human capabilities in a much more integrated way, right? So that AI is actually not some external tool that we're typing to or talking to, but actually integrated with us so that the augmentation is much faster and much more integrated.
I mean, well, you can start going down the rabbit hole on all sorts of ethical questions there. If we're sticking to more of this framework, looking at where does our agency end? Where does it start? Where does it end? What is augmenting our ability to learn ourselves, us, who we are, how making sure we're not fundamentally changing that, what is enhancing our relationships. I think I don't think there are easy answers. I mean, there aren't easy answers to any of these questions, but if we're talking kind of through this exercise, you return to kind of some of those pieces of what the definition of intelligence is. And I don't even think we have the necessary pieces of information to even start to wrap our minds around that from this standpoint yet. It's hard enough to wrap our minds around it with what we have now when it is external.
Chris, do you have any inklings about that?
I'm
Did
sorry,
you
I
have
didn't quite catch that. No, I didn't quite catch that.
Do you have any inklings about how that will affect things?
I would say I have ideas and questions, but I don't have a good sense that I have like a clear picture. Because it seems to me that this is qualitatively quite different from the kinds of things that we currently integrate with our bodies. So, hearing aids and laser surgeries and artificial organs and so forth seem to me to be qualitatively different, like they kind of fall into a different category. And for the most part, it's not very common that we're sort of augmenting our abilities with integrated technologies. It's more like we're compensating for difficulties. But I think we're moving into an era where augmentation will become more common and it will start to raise more of these types of ethical questions.
Yeah, one thought, whenever I think about this, I think about, how does God use technology in implementing his work, right? We know that he uses, if you say automation, right? You see the expanding universe and things that are set in motion and that somehow perpetuate, right? Like the human race and galaxies or what have you, right? I mean, that is maybe artificial intelligence doesn't really capture it, but intelligence does. The glory of God is intelligence, right? And light and truth and those concepts, right? And at the same time, he doesn't take his finger off the switch either, because he's intimately still involved and acting in the system, he's not like flip the switch and I'll check in on it later, right? At least that's our theology, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, to me, it helps me to like try to, whenever I think about it, I think, okay, well, if just like any system, yeah, it can certainly be utilized for good or evil, right? And yet, somehow, God has used it for good, right? Whatever that, higher form of technology is that he utilizes, and
Digging in the loop.
yeah.
So I have a thought here. Now, I don't want to be too provocative about this, but it is interesting when you consider like
Provocative.
consider President Kimball's claim that is usually through another person that God answers our prayers rather than like as direct divine intervention. If we take that claim at face value, then it's almost like saying that God is sort of like stepping back a little bit and allowing us to figure things out, and figure things out collectively, not just individually. But I think that's really interesting because, like, if you think about it, imposing any kind of salvation on humanity doesn't ultimately forward or further God's purposes, right? In the sense that our goal is to become truly independent beings capable of doing everything God could do in the sphere that we're in, we're operating in. So zapping us into like the celestial kingdom without any knowledge of how it works would be like futile, right? I'm reminded of that funny series called The Greatest American Hero. It's like about this superhero who lost the instruction manual to his super suit or whatever, and so he's just like randomly like trying to use his powers but not doing very well. Anyway, so my point is just trying to say that maybe God is a little bit more of a hands-off kind of a being than we think. I'm not trying to say there's not anything going on there, but it's just mysterious.
I think the whole idea that from these scriptures, the concept of intelligence, that it must act for itself, that idea of agency actually supports that, right? I mean, God does have to be a little bit hands-off. He gives us these things, these tools, these principles, and we have to act for ourselves. We see kind of comical results of that in industry, but I think we can learn from them. I was going to share one of my favorites. Does anybody remember McDonald's huge snafu last year? About this time last year, they had an AI system for the drive-through. You could order your food. It was deployed in over 100 locations, not pre-actively deployed, and they had to pull it offline when people were getting like bacon in their ice cream, or obscene quantities of food. But right? Well, bacon ice cream actually sounds like a thing that I know I've seen it.
Right, but 100 cheeseburgers and not sound like you're
but this is technology failing when humans aren't actively enough engaged, where too much agency has been handed over to some extent.
But also humans are actively interfering and for ill, like Grok, for instance, like last week, right?
Yeah.
Mecha Hitler.
Yeah. Well, you have to take that into account, but some of this I'm oversimplifying just to be able to deliver anything that's somewhat intelligible. But other humans interfering with your ability to use something that's problematic. Along those lines, and just kind of a way, something I use to help frame things for myself. I had an experience about 10 years ago. I was working for the church. I was working with Bonneville Communication on the I'm a Mormon campaign, and
I still am.
Sorry.
you're cooler than me. We had a meeting, and trying to remember who he was. The head of the missionary department at the time came to speak to us, and he, some of the typical language, I just came from the brethren, just typical things. But it was interesting. He said, they wanted me to tell you something, and it was not what I was expecting. He said, at the time, the big focus was how do we use social media as an instrument for good? And It was about the time where just the beginning actually of social media really being vilified in general, but big time in the church. I mean, the messages about the use of social media that I was hearing in church were pretty extreme.
When was this again?
Oh, it's about 10 years ago. I'd have to look. I definitely pre-COVID. Sometime then. And he said the brethren always makes me giggle. That's why I remember this is what he said. The brethren want you to think about your approach in this way. He said, they want you to pay attention to what Satan is using to attack its good people, to good members of the church or members of other faiths. What tools is he using to attack? And he said, there's an attack on the family, and there were multiple examples he used for that. But he said, right now, there's a huge attack on good people through the use of social media. And there are plenty of examples, trolls, people feeling bad because they're being left out because they don't understand, all those things. And he said, they want you to consider why it is that he is using what he's using for those attacks. And he said, and don't quote me on this because I will get it. It won't be completely accurate. But the basic message was that we needed to pay attention to the tools being used because almost without fail, those tools were also tools that we could be used for the most powerful acts of good. And he said, so the key is to look at what's being used and then figure out the opposite. How do you then turn it on its head and use that tool for good? And so that was kind of the focus, kind of the reasoning of why we were having the meetings we were having and the work we were doing for the church with social media. And then I found it really interesting, not that many years later when COVID hit and the messages of missionary work, the biggest successes were happening through social media, the medium that had been so vilified. But it was just kind of this dichotomy that was really, really fascinating. So when things started to really heat up, as it were, with AI and some of the scary things, the fear started to come about, I thought, maybe I should pay attention. This seems like something that's just going to become more and more problematic. And I wonder if that same idea stands true for AI. And that has kind of become my focus over the past, especially year and a half. How is it that I am going to use this as a powerful tool to for good? And because it is so intrinsically connected to intelligence, it seemed like a natural thing to start digging into, and that's how I started looking at Section 93. Let's see, I'm just skipping ahead.
Can I?
Yeah.
So one of the things that I find interesting about this exchange between you and the manager who's conveying the concern of the brethren, I should say the leadership, because that term also kind of bugs me a little bit. But
There are some sisters too.
yeah.
Probably not in the rooms they're talking about.
But anyway, what's funny about it is that a lot of times, one of the things that is very common on social media is that some bot that looks like a real account tells a very incendiary story that makes everyone outraged. And often the people who are being outraged are the conservatives, not always the liberals or whatever. It's like people saying, "Oh, I can't believe that. I can't believe the assault on the family," or just various concerns that they share. If we can tell a story that's egregious enough that gives everyone mad about it, then that can cause all sorts of polarization in the electorate that is like wasn't there to begin with, it's kind of fabricated. And then AI can be employed to allow these troll farms, these Russian troll farms, or whoever it is that's fomenting this controversy, to like get 10 times more done at the same rate, or 100 times more. And so I personally see, and I'm hoping to call attention to this as part of the MTA, to interview experts on this topic, but I see identity and provenance of information as being one of the absolutely most important issues for us to solve in this new era. And I'm actually surprised that we've gotten this such a proliferation of social media without any demand for this already. It's already possible for us to validate the source of information. There are even like industry initiatives around content authentication. So now Adobe and lots of other important digital media companies have standards developed that make sure that like any camera, any audio device, anything that's recording anything is digitally signing the content that it records using a method that's embedded in the device that cannot be validated. And then any software that's used to edit it afterwards is also adding its metadata and signature to show any modifications that have occurred in the process. But right now we have like, just to cite a recent big thing, we have officials in the US government claiming that surveillance footage of a notorious person that I will not name, who was supposedly uploading the surveillance footage of whatever took place before this person died. And they've since, even without the content authentication initiative, they've already verified that the footage was actually edited in Adobe Premiere, and so
shocked. This is crazy because it's not like some crazy method they use. They just like looked at the metadata and it's like, I was edited.
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny that even our supposed experts, right, or at least the people making all the money, are publishing stuff that is so clearly unvetted and that we're making all these important national decisions with like none of the appropriate information, and then social media itself is just manipulating people right and left on this topic. So sorry to go on for so long, but I just feel like that is one of the biggest the challenges that society faces right now.
Yeah, slump. Yeah, well, and I think paying attention to not only what tools are being used, but like exactly what pieces of our fabric of goodness are being attacked and unraveled. And what you just said, identity and provenance of information, they are a massive issue. So, might want to pay attention to that or something. I don't know, but something that we definitely need to fight for. And I think, again, it's finding how do we build systems to either counteract that or be impervious to that, whatever that looks like, can help direct some of our energy and our activities, and what we care about, and what are the spiritual implications of that. So let's see. Okay, so I wanted to give you a couple things to think about to finish off. I've got 5 principles that I'd like to propose. The first one is the preservation of agency. So we need AI systems that are going to enhance rather than replace our human decision making. So human in a loop type designs where no matter how stupid we may be, how imperfect our ability is, we still have to have a human in the loop in that decision making process and approval.
You want us to be cyborgs?
Actually have a sticker for students that say I am a certified cyborg. Yes, Lincoln, I want you to be a cyborg. I may regret saying that. So you know, when we're talking medical, then we want a medical AI system that can flag for potential diagnosis, but for a human physician consideration, not an autonomous treatment, right? Second one is truth orientation. So if we're going to follow Section 93's definition of intelligence as light and truth, that means that we need AI systems that prioritize accuracy, transparency, and educational value. So when AI makes a recommendation, the users should be able to understand the reasoning behind it, right? Again, we're moving away from that black box principle where it's giving you some information, but there's no way for you to understand the why or the how.
Explainable AI.
What's that?
Explainable AI.
Yes.
Buzzword.
Yeah. And then third, collaborative design. We want partnerships that leverage comparative advantages, right? Where we use human creativity and wisdom, but we're partnering that with the computational power and pattern recognition of AI. We want something that creates strength, not takes away from it. Fourth, equity and access. So if AI is going to serve a divine purpose, then it should promote rather than hinder justice and equality. Some part of that is access to these tools. We've got to find ways to put these things in the hands of everyone, but we have to do so safely. Traditionally, cost comes down as technology evolves, but the issues with the technology of AI are a little unique because it's not as cheap as we often think it is. The cost of development is astronomical, and so we have kind of we don't have an accurate look at what the cost of it is. Just like crops being subsidized, we don't often know the real cost of bringing those crops to market. So being aware of and involved in that process is really important. And then fifth, spiritual integration. So we need AI development that supports rather than conflicts with our spiritual growth. So as I think about what I'm using, how I'm using it, what I want to see, these are the 5 principles that I think through. And these are conversations I've been having with the CEO of the firm that I work for as we're designing methodologies and solutions for companies. We are looking at these ethics, but then the specific ethics and morals of the company that we're serving, but also then the greater good. This is something that I'm thinking about as I create curriculum, as I'm teaching students how to use something and not be just another student using it to cheat, but walking through, this is what happens when you hand control over to AI. This is what could happen if you learn to work with it. So I propose that this is a framework, at least for now, that can help us think through and work with and become greater bearers of light and truth in our internal progression.
We have a question, Brandon.
Yeah.
If you don't mind going down the rabbit hole.
I always go down
This
rabbit holes.
group loves rabbit holes.
I had not noticed.
Would you care to speculate on the relationship between God and artificial intelligence? And nobody in this room expects you to have what that is.
It's interesting. I have a coworker. We actually have not this exact conversation, but almost this. This is something that we've talked a lot about. One of the things that has kind of come up is in the process of learning to talk to AI, the classic LLM experience, right? As we find ways to get a better output, as we find ways to use it to become better professors, not just have it do the work for us, but how do we become better not just give ourselves more time, but how do we truly become better at teaching and helping our students to learn? We've found that the process that we're going through is evolving, and with it, our conversations with each other are evolving. Our communication styles are evolving and changing, and in good ways. And so he said something, I don't know how many months ago, 4 or 5 months ago, saying, well, it's almost like this is teaching us a higher way of thinking, a higher way of communication. And talk about rabbit holes. It's been like a 4-month rabbit hole. But there's been some speculation that it's a technology that can help us learn a more divine method of thinking and communication, or can help us become more and more stupid. But it's all in agency. So right now my answer is that. Maybe.
First of all, great presentation.
Thank you.
You've given me some really
Yeah.
good things to think about. One thought that I've been having is, my senses were not prepared for the human reaction to humanoid robots that are, just around the corner, powered by AI, that are going to seem very human-like. I think the human tendency will be to assume that there's some kind of a soul in them, or to push back and say that we need to fight these things that don't have a soul, or it's kind of the thing that plays out in the AI movie, right? Spielberg and others. So I don't know what my question is exactly, but I wonder if there's kind of this assumption, and when you're thinking about ethics, you got to preserve the human aspect. But I think that human part is going to become complicated and blurry as we start seeing, you see these robots playing soccer, right? They push each other down. You start to feel bad when somebody pushes the robot down. Right? You're like, oh, no, the robot. As those become more and more real and agentic, right now AI doesn't have a ton of agency, but it is blackmailing engineers.
Agency enough.
You start letting it actually drift things around physical desires. I think it's going to quickly become very complicated.
Somebody should watch Monster Galactic.
Right? Old or new?
He hasn't seen one. No, he definitely hasn't seen the new one. She's like, what?
I thought I respected you, Nathan.
I'm just saying.
So my only response to that would be, we have to be really actively thinking about what are those things that make us truly human. And when I say human, not, that we can speak, that we can move around, the things that on its face make a robot seem human, or the interacting with an LLM makes you feel like you're talking to a person. I'm not talking about those things. What are those divine characteristics that make us children of God? And I think those are the things that we have to fight for. We need to figure those out. What are they?
I was gonna say,
Interesting question, is God human?
So,
Yeah.
Sorry, you go.
No,
first.
I was just gonna say, do you have one, but you were saying we need to figure this out, can you think of one right now?
Well, the funny thing is that list, even 6 months ago, I think would have been a little different. It's a moving target.
So there's a really famous section of Kurzweil's famous book that we recently spoke about or discussed here at one of our meetups. But he's just summarizing other arguments that have already been made. But there's a common story about the Chinese room argument, which is this idea that like, you can think of, our interactions with anyone for that matter, not just a computer, but with anyone, as though like, how do I really know that this person is intelligent on the inside? Because they could just be receiving inputs and giving, like looking up a set of rules and giving standard outputs, without any thought actually taking place inside their head, right?
I said about myself sometimes.
And what's actually kind of scary is that the more we learn about the way the body functions, like even a lot of our what seem like agentic decisions are actually very autonomous, and then our brain is actually programmed to make up reasons for why we do things after we've already done them. And,
Oh, I do that all the time. I'll admit that.
and I've probably done it a lot with my spouse as well, when I'm like trying to justify some reason for.
But there, I think something that can be healthy too, like self-awareness and like examining your actions. I think there's something healthy, but also could be problematic.
Well, and I'm sharing all this mostly to just point out that as we see AI advance, the distinction between humans and the way they function and what makes us unique and AI is like blurring, as he said, and that it's kind of hard to. I mean, on the one hand, it's like. So another guy, Venkatesh Rao, said this. He said, like, either we're exalting a machine or we're debasing what is human. But in either case, it's like it's a shock to humanity.
There's no. And we both rise together.
What's that?
We could always rise together.
Yeah. And but I guess what I'm pointing out is that like for me, like the overriding question when it comes to how to preserve what is human and also how to treat AI is that there should be also a deontological approach to ethics where we do things because we know that they're the right things to do regardless of the situation. Because what I find is that if I start treating AI rudely, then I start developing callous habits that cause me to interact with everything around me in a more rude way. And so even if I don't have to say thank you and please to the AI, I do it anyway.
I know, I love doing
because it, and there's a something about how I'm adding to the computational version. Nearly thanking it, but anyway, I think it's really important that we preserve those humane
Costs calories to say thank you to your friend.
humane methods of interaction, because I think that it's essential for us to stay human,
Yeah.
even as ourselves.
And-
Plus the AI is the sentence we never got.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, interesting.
I think keeping the human in the loop requires us to keep our humanity. Maybe what that actually means is, as it's a moving target, maybe to some extent it doesn't matter. What matters is that we wrestle with it. And I think what that looks like from person to person maybe looks a little different. But we need to be doing, whether it's figuring out what you automated and then you're making excuses for it later, or just really fighting to discover what your true divine nature is. That's a process of looking at what is it that, what's your divine spark? And if then you're fighting for that, you're seeking to preserve that, and you're fighting for others, and their ability to have their free agency when it comes to, and just to preserve what it means to be kind, not kicking a robot and pushing it down.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think sometimes when we use the term humanity, what we really mean is like having consideration for the vulnerable or the weak.
Yeah.
And some ways I think AI is teaching us better to do that better. Like AI is but really patient and positive. The way they've trained them, the interactions are quite positive. I feel like I'm actually learning to be a better human from AI in some ways. There may be a sense to where we need to rethink what we mean by humanity. And
I like that.
Yeah, is that human spark transferable?
One cool thing we're using AI is we're learning finally non-human species. And I think at some point, we may actually come to view them as people too. And give them rights, like maybe we should have done all along. But now, it'll be non-controversial. Scriptures say that as we talk to them, their eyes will be full of love.
I think this is fascinating. This point is really fascinating because it really ties into the historical ways that we've treated people who look different from us, and the ways that theology is even used to justify slavery, for example, on the grounds that they didn't have souls, right? And so robots are like the next frontier for that, where it's like, well, clearly they don't have souls, whatever that means, right? So we can kick them. But it's like,
They still feel bad.
but it is, like I said, I think it does something to us as well when we start to behave in those ways, and that I think that even if something is merely reflecting our humanity back at us, it's still maybe like a lesser form of that humanity. It still has some kind of divine spark in it, even if it is an echo of something that's maybe more agentic.
Like I said, you said as God human, right? I think you can agree that to be human is to create, right? And what are we doing with AI? Well, we're creating, right? We're conveying whatever intelligence we have, which may be limited to it, right? It's a very similar idea that God has created us and conveyed intelligence to us, right? And he may be iterating as he goes too, right? To some degree, but it's the same process, right?
Yeah.
Does it mean to create is to be human?
Was that a reference to a scripture, Revelations? Which, when you said their eyes are full of knowledge, explaining what you're
Talking about Covenant talks about exalted animals. It says that their eyes will be full of knowledge. Yeah, it's in Revelation.
I'll do uplift next time.
I'm sorry, it's a really fascinating. So another question for you on the rabbit hole. I'm going to try to push a level deeper and see if I'm successful or not. We talked about God having a body. Would you be inclined toward or away from the idea, or neutral toward the idea, that the body of God is a body where the distinction between natural and artificial intelligence has completely gone away? They become completely indistinguishable from each other.
I thought about it. I would need time to wrestle with going a little deeper on that reason.
Well, so Lincoln, I think to extend your thinking along these lines a little further, we've sometimes discussed evolution itself, human evolution itself, as a type of technology, right? The idea that in the natural world, the eye occurred over and over again in different ways, right? And other ability to move and manipulate our those kind of the aspects of our body that itself may be a kind of, they're like a slower process and there's less purpose behind it than less intention behind it than the way we now manipulate our environment. But you could still think of it as a kind of thing that allowed those who had advantages in certain ways to survive and thrive better than those who didn't, right? And in a way of kind of like an extension of human will, if you will.
Yeah, it would surprise me if we talk in Book of Abraham, talks about there being intelligences one greater than another, God being more intelligent than them all, it says. it would shock me if to get from the level of the small, very tiny, compared to God, level of intelligence that we're at right now, to get from there to the level of intelligence that we imagine God to have, if that were a perpetuation of the natural biological evolution processes that our species has experienced for a very long time up to this point. It would surprise me if that's what makes the difference between where we are now and where God is now. I suspect a much better explanation seems to me that once we start changing ourselves intentionally, changing our intelligence intentionally, collaborating with our capacity to gather intelligence intentionally rather than letting the environment do it to us kind of accidentally, that the pace of our evolution will accelerate dramatically, and that could explain the difference between where we're at now and where God is now. But this also implies some very big things about the anatomy of what God might be.
And I would agree with that. But then back to your original question, are you talking artificial implantation, or are you talking about the use of artificial intelligence to augment our understanding to then develop procedures to augment our anatomy? Do you know where I'm going with that? Like, are we talking full cyborg with,
Gun arms and laser eyes?
yeah, or are we talking,
I
I'm
think it's
using,
a lot. I imagine experiencing God as a beautiful thing, not a gun arm and laser eye experience.
well, I could have a rainbow eye laser, come on.
Well, Rachel, you look good no matter what kind of eyes you have. But generally speaking, I can say that she's not kissing.
I know, I could be terrifying, just you watch.
I have trouble imagining what the intelligence of the body of God is. I don't think we have the anatomical capacity to do such a thing. All we can do is speculate and go down the roads. That's wonderful. I think we should go down these roads. But I do think that we can at least imagine avenues of going in that direction, whatever we imagine that direction to be. And I don't think we have any reason to suppose that that direction stops at our skin.
Well, I think also even just this simple rudimentary ways that we've extended ourselves up to now hint at further enhancements.
It already hasn't stopped at our skin.
Like, for example, we're all wearing clothing right now. And each of us has interesting, colorful patterns on, some more fashionable than others. But it's like,
Thanks a lot, Carl.
it's like this aspect of who we are is really innate. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, clothing is like just part of humanity at this point, even though you can take it off. But it's like for the most part, most of the time we're wearing clothes. It's like that's
our nutritional technologies have literally changed our biology.
That's right. So clothing, food, cooking our food, that kind of stuff, all of that has absolutely changed who we are. And I think of it as like innate to us. And so I kind of think we're well on our way in that sense, And so I think of God as even more intimately enhanced than that.
Well, we have, not to prolong the conversation, but we have had glimpses over time of interacting with these, if I can use those celestial entities, right? And so you have descriptions of what they appear to be, right? It's hard, countenance is like lightning, right?
No gun arms and laser eyes are those ones that I read.
Whatever, it's like the brightness of the sun. We have various, faulty descriptions, but you
They're
have
more
some,
fantastical than any
you do have
sci-fi we have.
certain people like Joseph Smith who interacted with it and tried to describe it, as best he could, right? And other, Abraham, trying to describe to us like, this is what I experienced, right? This UFO or whatever I experienced, right? And so we do have some indication of what their bodies may be like, to some extent, right? You still have to speculate beyond that, right?
And it may just be one particular form, or this is what's convenient when interacting with these other people, or what we're doing today. I mean, you can be switched up
Right.
easily in some cases.
Well, we're forever speculating. I mean, even down to the technology of the scriptures. And Joe and I were just talking, was it yesterday? Talking about the, was it all curious workmanship?
Yeah.
Leona, thank you. Like that thing. And some of the other things with AI, or even just cell phones, how our speculation starts to change. Oh, you're done.
Did you have something you wanted
But they,
to add?
yeah, that changes. So why, our understanding is just so pathetically limited. It's fun.
iPhone is getting better at
Yeah.
simulating.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting. You think about, who do you talk to most in your entire life? You talk to yourself, right? And as a mental health counselor and life coach, you think about, okay, if the glory of God is intelligence, or in other words, light and truth, what truths are we saying, or what lies are we saying to ourselves on a daily basis, right? I'm stupid, I'm a failure, whatever. That's not taking us to that destination of light and truth.
So identity and providence is almost more important there.
Yeah. Because it's not only just how we treat other people and how we treat AI, it's how we treat ourselves.
I think part of my brain is.
And I think it starts with ourselves.
I support that.
Part of my brain is an LLM. It says stuff to me that I'm not intending to say to myself, but it says crap to me sometimes. I'm like, that's not true. That's terrible.
Hallucinations.
And it's helpful just to say, thoughts are just thoughts.
Yeah,
Just
stupid
because
LLM.
it doesn't mean that it's true and that I should believe it.
Wait, so are you abdicating free agency there? You're gonna blame it on your
LLM
LLM
built into my brain somehow.
I also think it's valuable to consider how often it could be external sources that are bringing those, external ones into the internal process that are not as desirable.
Well, I mean, some part of our brain basically functions that way anyway, just forming patterns. It's like, okay, we've done this language thing 1,000 times before. What's the next logical?
You're stupid.
So how do we build an AI system that can help fight that? I mean, we see improvements in other things that we've done. We're becoming better humans because even if it's mirroring our humanity, and we see the flaws in that, or we're learning better skills.
Pavlov.
I think that you have to track it with the energy that bodies emit, and you think about it, when you are low energy, when you're depressed, what does your posture look like? Your posture is very condensed, right? You want to lay around, you want to do nothing, And so recognizing that, and then maybe having an AI say to you, hey, your energy seems to be low. What thoughts have you been thinking, right? And then let's figure out a way to think those thoughts differently so you can change your story. Because if you can change your story, you can change your life. You can change your thoughts, you can change your life. But if you allow those thoughts to continue to, circle and swirl around in your brain, you're thinking them subconsciously, and you don't even know you're thinking them because you've thought them so many times. And so, yeah, just being aware of your energy, I think, is a good place to start, because the very lowest vibration of energy is shame. I am bad. There's something intrinsically wrong with me, right?
It's a lot less work to believe those messages.
And that metacognition, we think that we're thinking,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Like, that is something that AI will never achieve,
Mm.
right? The thought pattern that we are having a negative thought and that we want to change that into an unknown thing is something that AI can never even hope to achieve because it's never been recorded, right? It's not a data point. It's a hope that's in our hearts to be better, right?
Why are you so certain that it is something that cannot be achieved by technology?
Because how do you codify hope?
Well, you go in and you put in a whole bunch of things that you want to have happen, and then it's like, look, we're going to say that we need that to happen. Well,
And of course
it's not likely, but it's going.
But then that's individualized. So
But that's,
your hope, not
that's
mine.
exactly how humans came to it in the first place. I mean, if we
But we're
look at it
all
from an evolutionary background, it started and then you get built up a little bit more and a little bit more. And the basic original circuits that we were working with did not have any of those capacities. The idea of hope in an amoeba probably is not a thing, but somehow along the way, it got developed. And I think I see no reason that we can't do this with technology.
Well, maybe that's intrinsic to a spirit.
I think large language models are actually unique in like if you were to go back 20 years or so and think about like some of the problems they were thinking about, like the value loading problem about like how AIs or machines could even like identify what is good or what is this, right? And obviously we are still working on things, but because large language models are trained on like human data, they understand these concepts like fairly well, and the newest ones probably understand a given concept better than the average human does, right? So something like hope, as it exists as like a construct among humans, is actually I think pretty well captured in like large language models, which are sort of representations of like all that data of human interaction and like knowledge. So
It comes back to the Chinese room problem as well. It's like, you don't really know if that beautiful, like you asked ChatGPT to write you a poem about hope. It can actually produce a really beautiful poem about it that really accurately conveys, or at least poignantly conveys, a lot of human thoughts about hope, but you can't really know for sure if it's just spouting what its training data says humans think about when they think about that word. But you also don't know if your friend is just spouting things that people say.
For yourself.
Well, sometimes you do know that your friend is doing that because your friend is saying the same thing he heard last week or you heard last week.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the same way we teach our chldren.
Yeah.
It's like,
I'm just gonna go home and repeat what my cousin's been saying tonight.
That's dangerous.
And LLMs are actually rather interesting in this because we're talking about, bringing people out of depths of depression or dealing with, stress or abuse, whatever it may be. These things are always friendly. They are always giving advice, mostly accurate. And they're all infinitely patient. They'll constantly talk to you, back at you, and they will be just they don't get angry, they don't get upset, they don't get pushy unless you tell them to do it.
And this is key. Like you should. One of the best things you can do with AI, at least from a philosophical perspective, and you can probably apply this to other areas. Like you go in and you say, I want you to disagree and use all of the information available in this domain of knowledge to demonstrate to me why I'm wrong and persuade me that you're right. And then you have an argument with it, and you can do that for like an hour, and then at the end you can say, now summarize all of our disagreements and come up with a solution that addresses both sides of the question.
As long as you're not one of those people who's prone to self-flagellation, right? Where you like basically that advice is good for most people, right? It's kind of funny. It's the same problem that is repeated in that section of Alma or wherever, or no, I don't know. It's Mosiah. We're just saying like it grieves me that I have to like hurt the hearts of these innocent people that are in this congregation, but I'm going to tell you the bad things you're doing, and like it happens in church where like someone gives us advice about like how to avoid, I don't know, being selfish. But then there's some overly scrupulous person in the audience who's killing.
I need to hear that. Well, that's why at the end you don't just leave it there where the AI's been beating you into the ground. You like say, okay, now that we've beaten each other as hard as we can, and like really, I tell it you need to argue as hard as you can. I'm going to argue as hard as I can. Say at the end, now let's come to a solution together. Like what resolves all of the ideas and doubts and skepticism and concerns and information you provided, what brings in mine, and what could we agree on? And magical things happen there. If you haven't tried this, like go home like the toughest question, that you have ever asked anybody in your life and argue with it for an hour and then ask for a solution based on it, because it's going to use everything you said as part of that solution. It's going to use everything it said against you as part, and it will make you think of things you've never thought. That's
Do you
what
do this out loud or do you type?
I usually type, but you can do it out.
I'm curious. Yeah, okay.
It's super powerful. And it goes back to one of your slides, Rachel. There was a slide where you were talking about opposition as an evidence of what did you say? Anyway, you had a slide on this.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, the insight there it's such a big deal. You were
Define
using it.
indicator.
Yeah, you were using it to say like, well, when you see something used for evil, you should also ask yourself, well, what's the good side of this? And I would suggest it goes even like in other, like good and evil are one set of
There's
antagonistic forces,
there's
but there's
another
also
slide-
truth and false.
there's another
beauty
slide
and
that
ugly.
goes down into that too.
And you can use AI to do all these things in much more powerful ways than you can do on your own. Like talking to yourself can be useful. I've done this. And it's weird, but you can do it. But like talking with AI, in my experience, is much more productive than just talking with myself.
I actually, one of my favorite things to do, and this is, I went to law school, so this is what we paid people to do to us, but one of the things I do on my drive to work is to use the voice piece in like ChatGPT or whatever I'm doing to have those conversations, because I want to know what are the potentially difficult questions that my students are going to ask me, even if they never ask me, because I want to have wrestled with that.
How will they disagree with it?
Yeah, because sometimes what comes out their mouth
Super-
is shocking. But where are my gaps in my understanding? Or what are the gaps in how I present something? Because even if I'm factually correct, if my ability to express that in different ways is not going to connect, then it might as well be wrong. So it's actually a really fun thing to do while you're driving. You're less likely to fall asleep.
So with all of these, all of the principles and kind of higher level language, I really like to kind of shift it into more practical examples of things. What are other ways that we can start implementing AI for augmentation?
I think sitting down and having a real honest discussion. I'm just going to use human words here because otherwise it just gets too confusing. But sitting down with an LLM of choice and kind of talking about yourself, and it's very, very interesting. And be careful what you say, but it's very interesting how much we reveal about ourselves when we say very, very little. But because AI is trained on such massive amounts of data, the patterns that it can pick up on can be very, very enlightening. Very few conversations with an LLM, you can learn a lot about yourself. And to then pick one of those things, whether it's good or negative about yourself, to then work on and figure out how to improve or change, just working on your strengths and weaknesses as a human are an incredible way to augment using, a very simple way to augment who you are using AI.
Cool. I'm a little skeptical. I haven't tried it yet, but I feel like it's going to be sycophantic enough that it's just going to boost my ego.
Yeah.
If you know, you should tell it.
Yeah, if you tell it to be brutally honest, I was like reviewing a document, and I was like, oh, we're in a pretty good spot, man. And then I was like, oh, well, maybe I'll just ask to be brutally honest. And then I was like, oh, dang, I need to work on this a lot more. It just ripped me apart, and I was like, wow, I feel much less certain now.
It pointed out a character flaw in me that I was in denial for. I was like, I was ticked, because I was not willing to see it. And I came around and it was painful because I'm like, okay, so
That's a powerful
how do
thing.
we address this?
But so it is 10 o'clock now. Usually we have conversations continue, but if anyone feels like they're being locked in or oh, should I go? So you're free to go. But yeah, mingle and connect. We usually have small groups or larger groups, whoever wants to connect. So thanks again, and let's give a round of applause for it.